you just need to start writing. A lot of times we put these barriers in our way, but we just need to write. The best thing I can tell you is just get very clear on that message that you want to deliver. I mean, this book is literally a letter to that person that you have an emotional tie to.
Welcome to the Love Your Brand podcast. If you're looking for real conversations with real people, you're the right place. Let's go!
Nothing to be nervous.
What's up, Lauren?
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
So good to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Feels like a long time coming.
I know, right? We had, what was it, a couple months ago, we had the first conversation.
Yeah.
And now the time has come.
Yes.
It's hard. We have some team members that are strict on the scheduling. And so we know availability and scheduling, syncing up calendars is a tough thing. So this has been a long time coming. We had to reschedule a couple times, kids getting sick. We all have kids. We all understand that, have to pivot. So we are excited for having you on today.
Thank you. It's all in the right time.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, guys, Lauren Eckhardt, is that correct?
Yes.
I pronounced that correct?
Love it.
With Burning Soul Collective. She's an award-winning and best-selling author, ghostwriter, and book coach, and the CEO of Burning Soul Collective. They believe every story carries the power to heal, connect, change lives. Based in Nashville, Tennessee, and of course, tons of books around them, right? I mean, that's what you do. You live and breathe writing and stories. So Lauren, give us a little insight on what's going on lately.
Oh boy, that's a big question.
That is.
The biggest pivot lately has just been really honoring the lane, my gifting, my specific gifting. And letting go of trying to do everything for everyone. That's been one of the biggest lessons over the past, 5 years since I've been doing this full time. 5 years ago, I started down this road in Burning Soul Press, which we did, everything from book coaching to publishing to ghostwriting. I mean, we were with the author from beginning to end. We had a PR department, marketing department at one point. We literally tried to do everything. And this started from a one-man show being me. Never ever expected it to actually be a company in that moment. I was just wanting to help people with the experience that I had. And then I just kept wanting to make sure that they were fully supported through the entire life cycle of being an author. Because what most people don't realize is, I think when you think about writing a book, it sounds like almost dreamlike. It just sounds like a fantasy until you get into it and you realize not only is it actually hard to write the book, but when you have the book out there, it's a full business. You truly have to treat it like a business. And so there are the marketing components and getting it out there because no one else is going to do it quite like you. So I was trying to provide those services, everything that the author needed. And, at the end of the past 5-year journey, I just realized more and more that my lane is writing. It's writing and brainstorming. Those are my two gifts. So it's letting go of what was, being okay to mourn that, that part of what I was doing is over. And which is hard at the 5-year mark because you always hear, like if a business makes it to 5 years, like it's doing good because so many fail in the first 2 years? Is that what they say?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary with Burning Soul Press, the first company. And ego-wise, it was really hard to be like, am I going to let go of this? But more and more, I'm like, I know I was gifted certain things for a reason, and I really want to be able to focus on that. So then comes Burning Soul Collective, my nonprofit that I am currently in process of fully launching, which is going to be focused on sharing people's individual stories. And, not everyone wants to write a book. Not everyone wants to, share it in that way. But through the past 5 years, I've learned that my passion is just people sharing even their individual life stories, and it doesn't have to go in a book. It's just the release and the healing of even being able to honor the life that they've lived and, you know, possibly share it to inspire and help other people too.
I love that. You know, we a lot of times with us being in the marketing industry, you know, it's all about storytelling. And that's what brands do really well, is really tell the story, the origin story of their brand, or so many aspects of it. I think so many people, they just don't believe I have a story to tell. And we've all walked through so much. And I think, you know, we all need somebody like you, because you ask those questions. And before you know it, these people are like, holy cow, like I didn't know that, you know, I had such a powerful story. Or, you know, because I don't think that we go through things for us to selfishly just, hey, I got through it, persevered, on to the next thing. It's like our story can bring such hope and, you know, inspiration to other people that are walking a similar journey. And so, you know, Jason and I, through just getting to know you a little bit over the past few months and prepping up for today, just seeing some of the stuff you've done. But I have a question right out of the gate I want to ask. I've heard numerous times people say when writing a book that your first book is going to suck. And so, two-part question. Is that true? Number one. And number two, if it is, what, do you just write a bad book to write it and plan for number two being, just, you know, the good one?
Just get it out of the way. Just get it out of the way, you know?
Right?
Just knock it out.
Yeah, it's like the scribble level versus like the full portrait painting hanging in a museum, right? There's a difference. You know, it's, I'm not going to say yes, because I don't like blanket statements overall. And, you know, people can come out of the gate like writing incredible books. And I do believe that no matter what, a book that's well written, meaning, you know, it wasn't just rushed. The time was taken. It had multiple eyes on it before it was officially released. No matter what, that book is going to change people's lives. I think it comes in with the fact that we are all, if we're doing life right, growing and evolving every single day of our lives. So it's honestly not going to take a lot of time to think, oh, that book wasn't as good as what it could be, especially if you've already started on a second book, because you're going to be better at your second book than what you were with your first book, right? So I don't think it's crap per se, but, you know, from your perspective, you're going to be really critical about it. Because you do get better and better and better with each one. So I think one of the hardest things people struggle with is just, first of all, that release in the first place. Like, okay, this book is ready to be out there in the world. Like, I'm okay with releasing it. And then also just like not wanting to go back and redo it, and just honoring that was the time in life that they were at and being okay with moving on.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, that's good. And we had, Lance Welch on, you know, a guest with the Legacy Navigator. I think that was his first book, and you helped him with that.
Yes.
And, you know, it's a phenomenal book. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he did a great job with that. You did a great job, you know, helping him with that. Do you find, so I am a recovering perfectionist. And so, you know, now it's all about excellence.
Wait, is he recovering, Jason?
Please say that I'm recovering.
Hey, he is.
It's hard.
It's Miles. He's made a lot of progress.
It's tough, but
one
you
day
know,
at a time.
If one day at a time, baby steps. It's like I need to go through AA for perfectionism. No, but with that, you know, it can be so crippling to where nothing is ever good enough, you know, because you're constantly adding on to it. So have you found with like book writing, is that a part of the problem, to where people, you know, you just continue to make it better and better and better versus, hey, just put it out there, get it out there. Like, can you comment on that?
Oh yeah. I'm working with a client right now who is very, very much a perfectionist. In a lot of ways, like, that's fantastic. You know, like, she does not, because you have like, I mean, it's like anything, right? There's different sides of the scale with where people are at. And you have the people who are just like rushing through things and just pushing it out there. And I'm like, I wish you didn't do that. Like, I wish you actually took your time, you know, but then you have the other ones who they're focused on it being absolutely perfect. And I warned her about this in the beginning, and now she's experiencing it because she didn't take my advice, is that what happens is that it's like a painting, right? Like, I love to paint. I'm not the best painter, but I will start painting something and I'm like, oh, I'm actually pretty good. Okay, this is looking really good. Well, then 20 strokes of the paintbrush later, and I ruined what was good, you know, 20 steps ago. So it's like, it's hard to know when to stop and be like, oh no, this is good enough. And she's found herself there. So now she's made so many tweaks to the book that she's like, I feel like it's gotten off from the message in the first place. And I'm like, this is what happens, like you have to have the stopping point. And again, that's why working with other people is so good. And I had told her, this is the point where we take it to the next level and have the editor come in and refine it. And, but she kept wanting to pick at it. And there's a point where it gets too much. And then you just hate your book. You don't appreciate it anymore because you've gone through it so many times. But then it starts to change because you're changing all these little pieces and it changes the big picture of it. So there's so much to be said with like trusting yourself in the process, like where's that perfectionism coming from? Is it that it's trying to reach a certain standard, a certain ideal that's in your head of what it should be like, So it's like really boiling down and asking those questions too, because like, what are you actually comparing it to reach that level of perfection? And we don't always even know what that is. We're just tweaking things the whole time, trying to get it to perfect, but we don't even have a set standard of what that perfection is.
Wow. That's good. We ask a lot of people we've had on, are somewhere in the career. And it's like, did you grow up and you wanted to be this? People are like, oh my gosh, no, my journey. But you are kind of the opposite. I think at 6 years old, you knew you wanted to be an authar. Is that correct?
I did. Yeah, it was my everything. I mean, books were my everything. Writing was my escape. I had a killer imagination, still do, pros and cons to that. But, even back then it was just like, I could just escape and create these stories. And for me, I could always see something. And then in my head, I like immediately take it to, 50 other different directions of what could be the outcome with this. And so being able to write those stories and really just have literally like nothing to stop you with where you can go with these stories. To me, there's so much freedom and beauty in that. So ever since I was 6 years old, I just started writing because it was therapeutic to me. And I would gift people stories. It was my way of like, gifting them, stories about their life or stories about their pets. And so it was always in me.
Do you think that, was it intrinsically like God made you this way versus, did your parents or what home life was like for you fostering and encouraging, pushing you in a direction? Or was it just that's who you were? You've always been.
Yeah, that's who I've always been. It's funny now seeing it, like, because I do think things come down without you even realizing it. And what I've noticed in my own life, because I grew up in a very like both my parents were working full time. So we were literally, it was in the Boot Hill of southern Missouri, which is the Boot Hill. We would out in the country just be roaming, right? Like we were just on our own all the time. And my parents were just working. They were just trying to support us. And my dad was always gone, so he wasn't really in my life very much. And then my mom, again, she was at work all the time. So I never knew that they had an artistic side to them. So for me, it was like I was this creative, artsy one going through life. And now it's so cool because my mom started doing poetry, I don't know, like 15 years ago or something like that. She is an amazing poet. So
wow.
Like, you had this in you this whole time, like it's so cool to see. My dad can like sketch incredible pictures. And I'm like, how did I not know this like my entire life? But it's because they were working. So I didn't really have that influence around me, but it's in me, right?
Yeah. So your DNA, I mean, it was in their DNA, it got passed down to you, so you didn't really see it or model it. But, that's fascinating. So let me ask this. You have two boys, right?
I do, yes.
So, when my daughter, she's 9 now, but I remember the stages where going to bed and they love story. She loved story time, just making up these stories. Are you like the pro storyteller with your boys, at bedtime?
I'm not. No? I read at books. I have never done the storytelling thing in that way. It's funny because you're the second person that's asked me this in a week, and I've never thought about it before. And I was like, I don't make up stories at night. And I don't know why.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is.
If you are, then you have a plethora of stories of books to write. So you should capture those.
Go ahead, Jason.
I make up stories, and I don't know why. It's like imagination station, right? I can do that when I'm reading a book. Sometimes it's hard to follow, right? And so I think it comes from years of marketing and coming up with those short form writing, honing in on those skills and how to convey messages really short and brief, because let's face it, people's attention span are nowhere, right? And always not having to use correct grammar, just speaking as you would speak in marketing. I don't want to say, me barely skidding by in high school and in English class helped the situation, but I was never really honed in on grammar. I would just try to portray it as a human and how they would say it with flaws and whatnot.
And that's part of your brand.
Yeah, even when I was like scribbling little scripts, for short videos and whatnot, never had that skill of sitting down and writing a lot of information, right? It's just not my fondest of moments. So I find a lot of people that's their skill, that then we can kind of play off each other, right? I can come in with a short burst of information. And to me, that was my biggest fear and barrier, which I'm assuming a lot of people listening, the same thing. It's like, crap, writing a book. How do I even, tackle that? And Jonathan always says, it's like eating the elephant one bite at a time. But I couldn't even comprehend it. And then, we had you on and you explained that there's still authenticity, that people have stories to tell. And even if you utilize someone else to help tell that story, it doesn't mean it's less authentic and real. It just means that they help deliver the information in more of a consumable format that best serves its purpose. So you lit a fire under me. I was like, just things started lighting up, left and right. And the next thing you know, I tell Jay Hill I'm writing a book. I'm like 3 chapters in, and
You really?
yeah, and I am getting support from a writer.
Yeah.
Like I told you, it's not my favorite thing to do, but I'm enjoying the process the most, because coming up with the short form, the chapters, the inserts of information, I really dig, and telling my story. The biggest challenge was being vulnerable. And what do I want to share? Well, I need to share everything, right? And be transparent, or I want it to be real. And I think that could be a big roadblock with a lot of people, that same fear that I had, and I still have, right? I'm on my first book, and this, like we said, a majority of them don't do well, the first ones. So I'm not trying to be a perfectionist, but at the same token, I don't want to drag it out for 2 years, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a big believer. I mean, if it was upon your heart, there's a reason why it needs to get out there. I think one of the biggest disservices we can do to ourselves, to this world, to our giftings, is when we're given something that resonates with us so strongly, like this idea. I used to call it like the golden butterfly theory. We all have these like golden butterflies that'll land on us, and it chooses us to bring this idea to life because of our past experiences. The way we perceive things, the way we've experienced things, our thoughts, our feelings about it, it's up to us to really bring that into life. But it'll only sit on us for so long. And if we're not doing anything with it, it'll flutter away and go to someone else who's like the next best to bring it to life. But they're actually going to do it. And I've seen that time and time again. I've seen that, even in my own life, like my first books that I ever actually wrote, the full thing of The Remedy Files, it's a young adult dystopian. I got this idea 6 years before the Hunger Games ever came on, or any of these dystopian novels were ever a thing. And I sat on it, and it came to me because music's a big inspiration for me. So I get story ideas based off of songs or albums. That's where a lot of things come from for me. So one of my favorite albums growing up was Third Eye Blind's self-titled album, God of Wine, track number 14 on that album. Changed my life. Like, it was just a time in my life where I really needed to like have this wake up call to how easy it is to numb ourselves and go through life, and like how we can't be like that. So I had this idea of this like utopian society where essentially everyone's numb, you know, like they don't know how to feel. And then, you know, like the events that transpire. Well, I sat on that and I would write some every now and then. It took me 10 years to fully write it. And I didn't finish it until 3 years after all of this dystopian craze happened. And once it came out, people were like, oh, this is too similar to the Hunger Games or other things. And I was like, yep. And hence the golden butterfly theory was formed. But I've seen it over and over and over again, you know, like because there are people, because it's not just about us. Like these stories need to reach people because of the impact of the message of the story and how people can relate to it. And so we're the messengers. Like we're called to use our talents, our giftings to bring that out into the world. And if we don't, if we come up with all of these other excuses instead, because a lot of mine back then was, I'm not good enough. Like there's still so much that I need to do, or I'm going to get caught up in the corporate life instead. And I don't have the time to worry about this, you know, because it's not going to make me money or whatever. There's so many excuses, but if we don't do it, someone else is going to have to do it for us. And to me, that's a shame. Like how heartbreaking is that? So
it really is. I've taught the past couple of weeks. I've talked to some people that, a few have written books and a few are writing books, and all of them kind of said a consistent thing that the goal with their book wasn't as much to make money, but it was more to make impact. And is that something that you see across the board? Because it's like with business and marketing, you know, we have like products that we could put out there that are like a loss leader to start to build a community, brand awareness, and all that stuff. And so we could put something out that we're not making money on, but it's the seed so that they can start to follow us, and then we could sell them with a big product. Do you see books as, you know, something like that people use it for?
So we, again, especially within Burning Soul Press, we would only work with people who would come in and say, this is a message, I want to make an impact. Like we wouldn't work with people if it was just like a business card for them or, you know, just to make money. Like, because again, I'm like, I want to spend my time helping people who want to make an impact. I'll be totally honest. 9 times out of 10, people come in saying, I want to make an impact. By the time they go through the whole process and the book gets out there, it starts to shift for them. Suddenly what becomes most important is making money off of it, being a bestseller and all of that. And I'm like, but in the beginning, all you cared about was the impact. And now it's shifted. And honestly, again, I see this a lot in like the business cycle. And I went through this, right? You start off maybe doing something because you love it and you want to help people. But then you get further along and you're like, okay, now it becomes about revenue and making money. And, you know, it's just part of that. Like we start to shift from a lot of what we started with within our heart. So usually that happens by the time these books get out. They shift their perspective and they get caught up in the numbers and all of that. I do feel like books are there to make an impact. And if you do want to use it to grow your platform, like I think that's amazing because we all have our groups of people who want to listen to us, you know, and who love our voice over someone else who might be doing the same thing. So I think they're powerful for that. And if you could really keep your attention on that above all else, I think you'll also see a lot of success with the book too, because the way you talk about it, the intention behind it is different then, right? If you keep your intention on the book itself, people can feel when your intention is about the revenue only.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if you're writing a book and you're just like, I'm going to sell a gazillion copies and, you know, be on the news and be the bestseller, especially your first book, right? It's like
back to that first book, this hard book.
I can't wait to read Jason's horrible book.
Right?
To me, it's like therapy. You know, it's like unloading and dissecting and evaluating and learning and growing, and like you said, I'm sure my next one will be completely different than this one, just from what I learned. And you said something really impactful on our pre-call. It was something about when you first started ghostwriting, you weren't sure, right? And so that's how a lot of people feel, because that's how I felt. I wasn't sure. I was like, that's kind of weird. Someone helping me write the book. I mean, is that going to be like authentic? Is it going to have my voice? I mean, I guess so if I read it, and put a Southern twang to it. But, that was my thoughts. And I know I've talked to multiple people and they feel the same way. They might not be gifted to write a whole book, but they want to tell the story and they need help. But they might think, well, it's lesser than. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. It's not, but it's, what is that stigma and how did you kind of break through that?
Yeah, so the story goes, I had opened Burning Soul Press, and then within that first week, I had someone reaching out to me saying, hey, I know you're helping people write, like coaching them through writing their books. Would you consider writing mine for me? And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. That seems really wrong because that is the general consensus without knowing. Again, we only know what we know, right? And if we don't know so it was a huge learning experience. So I talked to her. I was like, I'm just going to talk to her and find out, learn more about her story. I listened to her talk about it and I was like, wow, this is a story that needs to be shared with people. And her thing was she simply didn't have the time, the energy, or the desire to figure it out. And I was like, valid. Her passion was getting the story out so she could help more females specifically. And so I was like, okay, let's do this.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And I had no clue how much that saying yes to that one opportunity would change the course of my life. But we did it over 4 months and it was so transformative for me, for her. As you were talking about, it's so healing. She had gone through 25 years plus of therapy. And that's why she felt like it was time to share her story. She's like, I've been healed from this. I feel like I can share this openly. But when you go to write it in a book like this, it completely changes your story even more because now you have even more hindsight being who you are now versus who you were when you were experiencing everything in the first place. So your perspective on it changes, but you don't recognize that your perspective changed until you start telling your story again. Until that point, we're just living in the memories of what we had experienced in that moment of time that we experienced it. When we go back to reflect on it as being older, wiser, more evolved, it completely shifts. And that's what she said. We cried so many tears throughout because as a ghostwriter, I become that person too. So I'm living through it as though I'm going through it for the first time because I'm literally trying to take on her mind, her body, her emotions, everything. And so we cried so much throughout that time. And she said it was so much more healing than even 25 years of therapy. And then a whole new level came once we published it and put it out there. And she's getting all these letters from people she's never met before saying, I didn't realize that anyone else had gone through something like that. Thank you for sharing this. And then there were people that ended up coming to us wanting to share their stories because she inspired them to open up. And they had never shared their story with anyone before. So it's just that ripple effect that happens too.
Yes.
Beautiful.
That's amazing. Lauren, I want to go back to your childhood for a second. Because when I know the things you did under 10 years old, just made me feel like a dodo. I'm out played in the creek in the woods.
Making mud patties.
I'm making mud patties, climbing trees.
I was doing that too, okay?
All right,
overachiever. With the hogs in the backyards.
That's right, Missouri, right?
Yes.
But I think at 9 years old, you wrote a series of essays on some deep topics, right?
Yes.
Walk us through that.
it's so weird even like reflecting on that now, because now I have a 9-year-old. I'm like, I would freak out if he wrote a collection of essays like this. I would be very concerned. But no, I had this this vision at the time of someone stuck in a glass box, and they're like inside, so they can see out, but no one else who's walking around this glass box can see into it. So they're just pounding on the person stuck inside. It's just pounding on the walls. They're screaming. You just have all these people walking by, like not looking at them, obviously, because they can't see anyone in the box. And so it's just this like person stuck, seeing everyone walk past them, ignore them, when they're just like so desperate for help, for attention, to be seen, to be heard. So I had this like very powerful vision at 9, and I was writing this collection of essays. Like, it was so crazy. It was just my thoughts on like racism, divorce, the criminal system, like all of these things. And it was just in one of those like Mead notebooks, spiral notebooks, you know, and at the top in pencil was just this subject, and then my thoughts on it all underneath. And so after this image that I had, I kept hearing like one burning soul. So that's why I ended up naming this collection of essays was One Burning Soul. And that's what stuck with me all of these years. Like, it was my AOL username, AIM, back in the day. It was all my chat room stuff. So if anyone remembers talking to a One Burning Soul, that was me.
That was you. I was talking to you.
That would be crazy. Oh my gosh. So, you know, even come time to launch my company, that was such a just meaningful name, that Burning Soul. And, you know, I thought of it at the moment of just like helping people, like in the beginning, it was just helping people release like the stories, the dreams within them, right? Like being able to really just free all of that. But then as I've done the work over the past 5 years, and my passion has really become more about true life stories, I've seen more and more like different variations on that, just even with like helping people truly feel seen and heard for who they are, their most authentic selves, not walking around with shame, preventing them from connecting with other people. You know, it's like the full release of the stories, the reframing of how we've carried these our entire life, and shifting it into something else, something that's more empowering for us. And so it's been really cool with that Burning Soul. And then we've actually had a lot of clients come to us because of that Burning Soul name, because of what it means to them. So it's been really powerful to see how even that name has resonated for different people.
Such a cool name.
Thank you.
Yes. So I can see why, I mean, it would be tough to lift. So the Tuttle twins took all your writing, your essay writings. I've been reading it.
I love them. Like my kids
I do too.
Like, when we sit down to write something, they're like, "Mom, Tuttle twins, right?" I'm like, "Yep."
Hey,
that's what we're gonna watch.
Sometimes I think I learn more than they do. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, wow, this is okay. They're glazing over, you know, but I'm like, I keep reading, you know.
Right. Dude, Tuttle twins are amazing.
They are.
You know, I mean, look at the crap we grew up on, you know, the stuff we were reading, just this garbage. But I mean, how, like, at 9 years old, Lauren,
it's amazing.
I don't know about divorce and racism, criminal justice, and all this stuff. My 9-year-old daughter right now doesn't know about all those topics. Like, how did you know about these topics?
I honestly don't know. I mean,
Tuttle twins? You're writing about the Federal Reserve?
Let's get real. Back in our day, how we did not have the same filters as what there are today. So more than likely the TV running all the time. I mean, I would regularly, like anytime I would travel with my family, my dad was real into Married with Children, right? So I would fall asleep watching Married with Children, Al Bundy episodes, you know? It's like, so who knows? Like, I'm sure all of my programming came from whatever TV
Now it's coming out.
Yeah.
Now it's coming out. Okay.
I can't say that they were very wise thoughts on those topics, you know, but but at the same time, you know, I think inspiration can hit at different times, and like looking back, and you know, it's so cool, like how, and this is my obsession, like this is why I love people's life stories so much. Like, you just start to see like all these things that didn't make sense to you, and then like seeing over and over how God's using them in the most beautiful ways, like later on in life when you allow him to do that work in you. And like I love seeing all these like patterns in people's lives, and like, oh, it didn't seem like it made sense, but it made you able to do what you do today. I mean, it's like even with interviewing people like I do for ghostwriting and then these individual stories, you know, I went down the human resources route for 12 years, and that could have seemed like I thought it was a distraction from my writing because it was a corporate life. But now I'm like, oh, even through that, like that's where I became really excited about people's individual giftings. And I would do a lot with like the assessments and that sort of thing. And, you know, being able to interview people and really tune into like, what are their gifts? It all started there. And so now it's cool being able to see just a combination of my life play out into what I do now and what I'm so passionate about.
So you help people write their stories. You help people share their stories. And this podcast, I mean, that's our heart and our focus is to hear stories like you're sharing. And, you know, there's one thing, we don't just want to know what you're doing right now, how you can help people. It's like, how did you get here? So as we're like learning this, you know, at 6 years old, you know, you want to be an author. At 9 years old, you're writing about criminal justice, which at 46 years old, I don't know how to write on criminal justice, you know, but it's like our story is such a journey. And I think so often we focus on the destination, like what does success look like? Or we're looking at these things and where we want to get to, when actually the power and what connects people is that timeline that goes all along the way. I know for me, like there's a lot of stuff I want to share. There's a lot of stuff in the past that I've wanted to share. And we can get stuck because we're in the middle of that season of our story. So it's like, I'll just write when I get out of this, you know, and it's like procrastination. It's just like, whether there's fear around it, like, no, I'll write, because then you get out of that season. I heard one time somebody said, you're either going into a trial, coming out of a trial, or in a trial. And it's like,
sounds about right.
You think you're coming out of something, you're about to go back into something else, right? And so there's never a good time. The good time is always right now. Yeah. But you knew that you wanted to be an author, but in high school, you stopped writing, right?
Yes. I mean, it's very similar to what you were speaking on earlier, Jason, with like that, you know, fear of like your grammar not being where it needs to be a good writer or anything like that. That was never my strong suit. Still isn't. Maybe it's the whole Southern roots thing, you know, like I don't know what it is, but, so yeah, I had been writing story after story. I always joked that like I peaked in, you know, elementary school because I would win like all the young author awards every year, in the science and social studies fairs, one every year. So, you know, proud years back then.
Nice.
Like, I gotta be able to celebrate something. Okay. But then I reached junior high, and it's funny because I just found this story the other day. I think I tried to find it after we got off our pre-call, and I was reading it to my boys, and they both started crying too. And I was like, okay. So I wrote this fiction story, and I read it in front of my class. This was junior English class in high school, and had everyone crying because of the story. All the boys, all the girls, everyone's crying. Everyone stands up to applaud my story, and I'm feeling so good about it. Like, I'm pretty sure for about 2 days, I was like, yes, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And then I get my paper back, and it's so funny how like certain memories just get burned into your head, right? Or into your mind. I can still see that teacher handing me the paper and just the look on her face. And she was probably my age. This is what's crazy thinking back, but she had like braces. She was doing braces again. I just remember seeing the braces in her face as she handed me this paper, and it was all marked up in red.
What?
And I was an A student, and there was this C. It might have even been a C minus. I'll have to go back. So just not, I mean, like that ruins you in high school when you feel like your grades are everything, you know, but especially in something that you thought was really good. Like I thought it was going to come back and be like an A plus and, you know, like all these great remarks. That scarred me. I mean, especially at such a, you know, vulnerable point in your life. And I literally stopped writing at that time. I started doing songwriting instead because it was another way to be able to, because that was, again, my therapy, So I went into songwriting for several years afterwards, but I did not actually write stories until way, way, way later. And it was that idea that I had for that book specifically that got me going again on it. But that's also one of those things that I always think about is like, if I never had that roadblock, would I have gone in writing that book with more confidence? And, so it's, I mean, who knows, right? I still could have come up with 50 billion mistakes or reasons not to write it, excuses not to write it. But I don't know. It's interesting, the chain of events. And I do feel like there's always going to be the people who challenge us, who make us doubt ourselves. And we can either succumb to that, or we can be victorious and confident in our own individual giftings, our callings, the things we need to do, and make that happen. I see that a lot with books. And I always warn people, especially people who are writing memoirs. And it's been 100% accurate with all of the clients we've worked with, because I always try to prep them in advance. When you are sharing your life story, your biggest critics are going to be the people closest to you. They're going to be the ones most hurt. They're going to be the ones who do not understand why you're writing this. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is sharing any part of your book as you're in process of writing it with those people, because you're suddenly going to lose all motivation to write at that point. And
so tip number 1, write it and release it. Don't share it.
Yeah. Well, my philosophy behind that is a couple of things. I always tell people, like, number 1, write for yourself first.
I like that.
That's good.
You need to be vulnerable between you and the pages, or you and the computer screen, like whatever your personal method is. And that's different for everyone. Like, weirdly for me, and I think it's because I grew up in a time where computers were starting to become a thing, and, especially the chat rooms and everything. Like, it was, I learned how to be more vulnerable when I'm typing. If I try to do a journal, there's like a block for me there. I don't know if like my older brothers stole my journals a lot when I was younger or what, but like I feel like I can't get as vulnerable when it's like handwritten versus typing it out. So you have to know what works best for you to find that vulnerability. But no matter what, it should be between you and the screen. I'm going to say the pages. Otherwise, once you start filtering, you're not going to be as raw and authentic. If you're already thinking about who's going to be reading this, what's their reaction going to be to this, like especially if it is your life story, you're going to leave things out. You're going to start rewriting it differently than what you would otherwise.
That's so good. That connects with me because on top of being a recovering perfectionist, I'm also a recovering people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm recovering in a lot of areas. But I used to...
You were a people pleaser?
I was a big time people pleaser, man. And, people pleasing is such an inauthentic way to show up because I just wanted to make everybody happy. And it wasn't truly being myself, because I was afraid if I was truly myself that you would not like me, or you would reject me, or whatever it was about any topic. And so it was like once I worked through that, it was like, then it just opened up so much more because you can see when somebody is vulnerable, somebody's real, somebody is raw, it unlocks things within other people, and it unlocks things within yourself. But Lauren, when you say like the people closest to you, like, are you talking like family members? Okay, family members, because like, like my wife is one of the most supportive people that I know. And so, we go through everything together. I'm assuming maybe you're not saying like your immediate spouse, but maybe the parents or siblings or aunts and uncles, the people that you grew up with, to where there's some tension there, and maybe they're going to be exposed if you're sharing stuff, because they're going to take it on themselves. And instead of just hearing your perspective and your story. Is that what you're kind of meaning?
I would, yes. I'm glad you clarified that. Yes, it's interesting because people tend to have more fear that their spouse isn't going to like what they're writing. Again, 100% of the time of the clients I've worked with over the past 5 years, their spouse has always been supportive and has always been encouraging. And it's been beautiful for them to realize, oh, these were fears I was holding on to, but you have to give them a chance to react, right? When it's your spouse in that way. Family, totally different. Specifically, and even friends, if they have been with you since childhood, because it's hard for people to not only see you as someone different than what you were back then, but also they're having a different perspective, a different experience than what you're having, right? Especially as you were a child, a teenager, a young adult, experiencing life for the first time in different ways, like you have a totally different experience than what they want to believe that you had. And it's really hard for them to accept that you experience something different. And they want to deny that. They don't want to honor that. It's really difficult. And so they don't like it. They don't like they don't like reading about what you perceived that whole time, because a lot of times it will crush the dreams of what they thought the whole time.
Wow. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
I would, my wife, she is definitely a supporter, but she's like a super editor, right? Every LinkedIn post, everything. It's like 2 days later, hey, here's your edits. I'm like, oh, man. So
that's teamwork, Jason. That's what you want. You want
right?
teamwork.
That's why you married her, man.
Yes, I tried to be proactive before the post, and it didn't work out. So I just live with the fact that, I got to learn my lessons from afterwards. But no, great supporter. I want to touch base, Lauren, on, I think now, long form writing and content is huge, right? I mean, it's unparalleled from what I've seen in the last 25 years. My wife will buy books, physical books, then end up getting an audiobook, right? Because, with kids and family and work, we're all busy, right? And driving, they're just easy. Working out, you end up listening. Like podcasts, long-form podcasts have gotten really, big. So it's what I think, as it comes with branding and marketing, and also brands in general, and I'm talking about businesses, industry leaders, every industry, that it's a good way for them to showcase their knowledge, their leadership, create content. I think every business should explore podcasts, should explore, writing books or white papers or, any kind of long form content. And that's kind of my advice now when I'm talking with people. Talk to us a little bit about that, Lauren, how you perceive that.
Yeah, I think it's so good because there's just, again, a difference, right? Like people can log on and take your course. They can log on and read your blog. They can, follow you on social media. They can listen to your podcast. Like all of those things are great. There's just something about holding something in your hand that makes it feel closer to you, right? And it's in those moments that you're totally alone. You're snuggled into your bed and you're reading something. There's just something that's so much more intimate about that. And that's one of the biggest differences. Like I work with a lot of well-known keynote speakers, they're out there all the time, like talking and presenting. And one of the biggest shifts that I have to make them have when we sit down to write a book is this is different. You're out on stage talking to thousands of people at once. That same tone doesn't work the same, even if you want that same message to be there. Like when you are actually sitting down to write a book, you are literally inviting someone to sit on the couch with you while you help them one-on-one or, talk to them about your life and you're sharing those stories. It's so much more intimate. So it's like really shifting how they're used to operating and bringing them closer in to more of a one-on-one when you're writing this book. It has to feel more intimate. And so I feel like there's so much power in a book for that reason, because people can feel it too. It feels like a personal relationship versus something that's out there for the masses to consume at any point, when you're holding it in your hands. So I think it's a great way to really, establish a deeper relationship with people for that reason. I'm coaching someone right now who a lot of people know her life story. They are aware of a lot of the trials she's faced. She's going in right now to write about it in this book. And she's sending me messages going, because I ended up challenging her. She tried to skim over things. I was like, you got to go deeper. You got to open up more about this. And she ended up sending me some messages, and she's like, this is so hard. I know you're right, and I need to do this. Because I'm like, people aren't going to connect with the surface, they're going to feel whether you're up here or really diving in deeper with them. But you have to be willing to get that vulnerable and share things that aren't going to always be out there in all the other forms of consuming.
Deep in your soul.
Mm-hmm.
Burning
soul.
Burning soul.
We need to TM that. I think, Lauren, you brought up a good point. I haven't thought about it from that perspective. I've spoken on stages before as well. And it's like you prepare for that for an audience, a wide audience, and a message for them. But I'd heard, and sometimes when I do my writing, I imagine one person that I'm writing for. And so I may be posting on LinkedIn and have a wide audience, but I'm writing to one person, and it changes the tonality of my writing. It changes, all elements of writing, because I'm being specific to that one person. Is that an approach or a strategy that actually works, or am I just crazy?
So again, it comes back to the content specifically, and how you shift your focus. Because I always say this is where it gets kind of weird for me. So as I was saying earlier, you need to write as though no one's going to read this first, right? That's first draft. But then second draft, you come in and you start editing more for the world, is what I say. So first draft is always just for you. You can get as raw with the stories and everything else. And I say save that version for your kids, your family, that should be part of your legacy. The honest, true, raw version that people may or may not get, right? It's up to you at that point with how much of that you want to share. Usually there's going to be a lot more details that you're not going to always share with other people. But then that edit comes in, and that's the next part. Because I always tell people, same thing, you have to pick one person, but the key in that is don't just create this random avatar. I feel like so many of us who have been in marketing or running a business in any way, we've been given advice, create an avatar of your perfect client, that doesn't do anything. You have to have an emotional tie to that person. Otherwise, it's not going to drive you when you're writing a book. Whether it's your niece that desperately needs this message right now in this moment, whether it's you from 20 years ago and what you wished, you have to have someone in mind that you have an emotional tie to, because that's how it gets really deep, because you're going to make sure that they know everything that they need to know to, help them or walk them through this or to inspire them. It's also going to change how you tell the story, like you were saying. But then I also feel like it helps drive that urgency a little bit too, because suddenly it becomes super important to get this done, because you want other people who are whoever that, person is to you with that strong emotional tie. You want to be able to help as many people as possible.
I like that. And good. Lauren, we've had the luxury of meeting with you a few times, so we know a lot of your story. To ask questions today for our listeners, March of 2020, when we had the pandemic, we had Freudian slip, Jason. Anyway. Google's gonna love that one.
Algorithm shift,
right? And we're dead.
If this episode tanks, why it tanks?
Exactly. We were going great until the 54-minute mark, and then we died. But during 2020, whatever that was, you got really sick.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you saying, you're like, what am I doing with my life, kind of thing. You know, we get in those moments and sometimes we self-reflect and ask like you did, what am I doing with my life? And it wasn't long after that you picked up your first client, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, ghostwrited, or, fill us in on that, like how that went down.
Yeah, that was crazy. I think it had always been brewing there for sure. Just this like desire to do something bigger. But then when I got hit with COVID and the peak time of when everything was like, oh man, if you get this, you are going to die. Like you are guaranteed to die once you have COVID, like that was all over the news. And so it was the beginning of March, 2020. And or end of March 20, it's somewhere in there. Yes. March 2020. I was quarantined from my family for 2 weeks. And it was during that first week, especially. And like, I could not breathe. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to wake up the next morning. And, it's this whole thing. And so I was like, okay, so what, like, this is how I'm living my life right now. How am I going to change this? And already leading into this, like I had worked with multiple like best-selling authors on their books, like just for free. Like they would turn to me and be like, hey, what do you think about this? And and this was primarily fiction. Like I hadn't even thought about doing nonfiction at this time. It was just fiction. They were asking me, to help improve their book. And I had so much fun doing that. Like, it just lit me up to know I was helping these already, like, established authors. Like, they trusted me enough to ask for my advice on how to improve their books. And so I was like, you know what? Like, that makes me happy. And then I started thinking about my path with how I put off my dream for so long. And I'm like, I just want to help other people write their books. Like I want to motivate them so they don't put it off any longer, guys. Like they actually get it done. And that's what would make me happy. And it's getting more common, I feel like, but it's so easy to coast through life without asking yourself, like, what actually makes you happy? You're just going from one thing to the next. And for me, I was stuck in this like corporate cycle where every year I was getting promoted, and like I was getting a killer salary and my car was provided by the company, my iPad, my phone, like everything was provided by the company. So I'm like, it seemed like I was set, like, oh, this is the good life. This is fine. But it wasn't fulfilling. And I don't know if people actually stop and ask, like, what's fulfilling me in my life? Like, and once you do, once you're on your deathbed, and you never want to wait that long. So even if it was this like faux deathbed, like, I'm so glad that it gave me the ability to like stop and really be like, nope, it's time to pivot. This is the time to change my life. And so I filed for, my LLC and did all of that. And yeah, it was that first week I got clients immediately, people who had been following me. It's crazy too. Once you put stuff out, like you don't even realize who's following you and actually paying attention to your stuff. And then they connect with you and they're like, oh, I've been following you for years. And you're like, I didn't even know that.
So real quick, pause. So they're following you like on social media.
Yeah.
Is this a personal page or did you have a business page?
Personal.
So, which is so powerful to where, Jason and I, we talk often about our personal brands with our business brands being synonymous with one another, and to where you were just showing up, being yourself, being authentic, providing value from just a personal perspective, not trying to sell product or push product or do anything. And you launch the business officially so people know because they've just been connecting with you through your authenticity and they want to move forward with you. That is a powerful part of your business story.
Yeah. And again, it's just people that like, that's why I go back to, we all have this audience. And a lot of times we don't even realize that we have this audience. We think sometimes we're just like throwing things out there and no one's actually paying attention, but you have people who are hanging on to every single word. Like even over the past 5 years, the number of people I've had randomly reach out to me from like 20 years ago in my life, I didn't even know they were Facebook friends of mine. Like they're hanging on to every word, and they're bringing up things that you said 2 years ago that changed their lives, but they never reached out to you in that moment. But now all of a sudden they are. Like, it's incredible. So yeah, I had people immediately sign up for this like little miniature coaching program that I put out. And then that's when I got my first ghostwriting client. So in the first week of starting, I made $40,000. And I was like, okay, I guess I can get paid for this and make a living off of this. This is great. So it was powerful.
That is awesome.
There's a hidden community. We always talk about it when it comes with engagement. So, I don't always look at the engagement as success. Like Jonathan said, I had someone come and say, hey, I've been following your stuff for a while. Can you help with social media? And I'm just like, dude, you didn't like my stuff, comment on my stuff. It's like social anxiety, right? It's the same thing. Like if they're at the party, they might not say, hey, come up and talk to you because they don't want, to see Sam over here talking to Samantha or whatever. So I think it's a form of social anxiety that you've got a lot of like scrollers that are truly interested and will watch everything you post, Lauren, for 2 years, never like, never comment, never DM you, and just boom, hit you up out of nowhere, right? It's kind of on the side.
They're screenshotting your stuff and like reflecting back on it. And I'm like, that's crazy. Like you said, you never liked it, but that's okay. Apparently it hit. So you have to trust that, know?
Yeah.
That is a valuable lesson for people to hear of showing up. We always talk about like it was social media. It's a long play. Mm-hmm. Consistency is how you win in social media, because so often we've been programmed to do it for the interaction, for the engagement, for the likes, for the comments, everything that Jason just shared. And so when we don't get that, it's kind of like your high school story. We just get deflated, discouraged, defeated, like, well, crap, nobody's following me, nobody's liking me, my stuff is not good, so I'm just going to quit. But there are people that, it's not a safe place to comment because somebody might see, oh, you liked what Lauren posted, you liked what Jason posted, so I'm just going to be hands off. But they can regurgitate everything that you've said for years. Mm-hmm. And so don't quit. For anybody listening, don't quit. Mm-hmm. Keep going after it. Be consistent and just keep being authentic.
And you're not going to get fired now for liking any of our podcast stuff. Just FYI. That time is over. So,
hey, because of 2020, this podcast isn't even going to make it.
Join the party.
We'll have to try again in a few months.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly what you said, though. I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about with the book and your intention, like if your intention is more on the external feedback, essentially, you're probably going to end up disappointed with the results. But if your intention stays to like your heart behind it and you're so confident and rooted in that's what's going to take that, have that impact. And it might be a long-term game. I mean, every client before we get started, I'm always like, if this is not a book that you feel like you can talk about every single day for the rest of your life, then don't write it. Because it needs to be that meaningful to you. It needs to be that exciting to you. And it doesn't matter what everyone else says, like it has to be meaningful to you. And I mean, we'll see if you experience this, Jason, but it's one of my favorite things that happens when you write a book, especially if it's like a self-help, a memoir or inspirational book, and maybe even fiction books too. But every single client goes through a period where it's almost like something happens in their life that's related to exactly what they're writing about. And it really challenges what they're writing about and almost like tests the concept. And like the number of times they've been like, if I didn't write that would not, like, I would not be where I am on the other side of this. Like their own book helped them as they were writing it overcome something. And I think that's so cool that we're being challenged to really like, how solid is this? Like if it can't help you, is it really going to help other people? Like how are you getting in this?
I think it's your own self-help, right? It's like, it's already manifesting, future ideas and concepts and things that I had on the back burner that I need to bring in the foreground, right? And it's causing that disruption of man, we got to get going. We've got to start on this stuff because I'm dissecting it and pouring out, my knowledge of the industry. So it's like, now I've got to get this ready. Now I've got to get this ready. And you're totally right. It's like self-help, motivation. I mean, manifesting, if you're in all that, it's all that balled into one, and exciting. I'm just pumped, I'm just, I hit a season to where I'm just like, just let the haters hate, right? We always say, if you're doing anything worth doing, you're going to have a lot of haters. So that's why, we get comments, and I don't even bother with it unless they're good. If they're good, we might reply.
Yeah.
So I just roll with it. Take one step at a time and get it going. 'Cause, that's usually the hardest thing, right? Is taking that first step.
Yes. Yep.
So Lauren, like as we kind of wrap up this episode, we're, for people listening that want to write a book, but they have fear, they don't know what to do. Like, what would you speak to somebody who knows they have a story to tell, but they don't know how to get started?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me. That would be a great step. LaurenEckhartWrites.com. We are actually in process of launching an app too. It will be called the Soul Writes app. That will help people from those beginning stages and on. So that'll be a really great tool. Hopefully it'll be released in the next few months. But I know it sounds so cliche. You just need to start writing. A lot of times we put these barriers in our way, but we just need to write. And the beauty about writing, again, it's not going to be as romantic as what a lot of people perceive it's going to be. It's going to be hard work. I mean, it's like working out, it's can be really hard to get into, especially if you've been out of it for so long. But once you get started in it, you'll start to feel better about yourself. You'll start to feel stronger overall. I mean, mentally too, once you start writing some of these stories and releasing it. But you have to start. And a lot of times the best thing I can tell you is just get very clear on that message that you want to deliver. I mean, this book is literally a letter to that person that you have an emotional tie to. So what is the message that you're delivering to them? If you're not crystal clear on that, it's going to shoot off into a lot of different directions. So know what that is, and then start identifying the stories in your own life that really convey that message, that support that message. And then you can sprinkle in everything else after that.
That's so good. You said LaurenEckhartWrites.com?
Yes.
And it'll be somewhere.
We'll drop it in the show
descriptions.
Notes. Is there a social platform that is your primary source that where you show up?
I do Instagram stories quite a bit, almost more than posts. I do more stories than anything else. So I would say Instagram's the go-to.
Perfect. So
And
Lauren, go Jason.
The app. I think whenever it gets close or even launched, I think we should have you back on and chat about the app, because that sounds very interesting as well.
It's going to be jam-packed with hopefully everything someone needs to keep them motivated. I'm actually using my favorite fitness app as inspiration, because I'm addicted to this thing. Because it has the macro counting on there, and it has stars that you achieve every single day, 5 stars from doing all of these different things, walking, getting your water in, the macro counting. It's got the recipes, it's got your workouts. And I'm addicted to it because it makes me stronger in one of my goals, right? And so I'm really using that as an inspiration for this writing app. It needs to be something that every day you need to help you grow in your writing.
That's awesome. Well, like Jason said, we'll have you back on. We'll go through that further. But Lauren, this is so good. Thanks for sharing your story with us. You kind of lit a fire, like Jason said, our pre-call a month or two ago, you lit a fire in him. He's already in 3rd chapter. You said some things today that lit a fire in me to get started and quit procrastinating on some stuff that I know I've been pushing off. And I think you gave our listeners just valuable, easy things that they could do to get started and kind of overcome that. So LaurenEckhartWrites.com. You can follow her on Instagram. She shares her personal stories, get insights into her life. Thank you for joining us, Lauren. And thank you guys for paying attention, listening, and being with us today. Until next time, we will see you.
Peace.
Peace.
Thanks for listening and joining us on the Love Your Brand podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode, and remember, share the love.